We've got an amazing speaker today. His name is Sean O'Sullivan, and he is a global investor and a philanthropist. He went to Rensselaer Polytechnic as a, oh, good job. and started a company called Map Info. And then since then has started other companies and then started investment firms. And his investment fund is SOSV. And one of the things they invest in is organizations and communities that help startups in a certain area. Does anyone here ever heard of IndieBio? I know there's some health tech people here. Yeah, so IndieBio is one of the accelerators that SOSV has invested in. And I was really excited to hear about Sean, especially since a whole bunch of my friends who have started biotech companies went through IndieBio. And they said it really helped them get their company off the ground. And so you can read more about him on the bios and about SOSV. The other person today that I'd like to introduce, Sean's going to give a talk, but Kyle, stand up, Kyle. Okay. So Kyle took Newton series in 2019. He took Newton series in 2019, and he's been giving back. So he contacted me and Vicky and said, hey, do you need help getting any speakers, right? And so he gave us a list of speakers, and I chose Sean. And he's the one, he used to work with one of the companies that Sean invested in, and he said he contacted Sean and got him to fly all the way here from New Jersey to speak to us. Isn't it amazing? And then the cool thing is, Kyle is a bear. So go Bears. And so what we're going to do now is Sean's going to give a talk. Kyle's going to moderate and ask him some questions, and then we'll open it up to everyone else. Okay? How about? Oh, quick. While they're doing that, quick, take your attendance. Okay. Yep. Other side. You know what? I'm so used to doing this shit with you. Can you tell? Do you need a clicker?
No, I'll just.
So here is Sean O'Sullivan. Let's give him a welcome. Please, those people in the back, please don't talk, because we can actually hear you down here, and we hear every word you say, which I don't really think you wanted us to hear some of the things you say.
Hello. Can you guys hear me in the back? All right, thank you. Can I ask a quick question? How many of you guys are, say, I don't know, engineers? Any engineers in the crowd? Quite a few. Any graduate students? Okay, and then any sort of business majors? Yeah, cool. And any other sort of scientists or anything else? Yay! All right, awesome, great. So thanks for just helping me figure out who I'm talking to. This talk is about building communities and investing in impact. It's actually something that we call Journey Talk. So at SOSV, we back about 125 new startups per year. We are often listed as the world's most active investor in climate tech. We are actually have been the world's most active investor in climate tech since 2011. We are the world's most active investor in life sciences and also in the world's most active investor in hardware, physical devices, medical devices, robotics, drones, whatever it is in the world of hardware. We've backed over 200 companies just in the hardware space and 1,000 companies overall. But one of the things when we get a team of entrepreneurs together, and we back the companies. We're the first professional investor in most of the startups we back. We give them checks of about $500,000. We work with a lot of graduate students, postdocs and whatnot that apply to our programs. We give them $500,000. They have to have a team. They have to have a prototype of some kind. And then we'll help with a 4 to 6 month program to then get them the next couple of $1 million in what's called a seed round. So we start at the pre-seed round. And when we start with a group of entrepreneurs, it's like a cohort. Like when you go to school, you have a cohort of maybe 40 or 50 or maybe 2,000 other students in your class. And we have a cohort of about 10 companies at a time, about 40 people, 30 to 40 people. And they give a journey talk. And that's what I'm going to do now today. It helps build community. I hope you do something like Journey Talks in your own programs here at Berkeley, because sometimes you see a person, you look at this person, and you make a lot of assumptions about them. You can look at their gender, their color, whatever. You can look at me and say, hey, there's a rich white guy. What does he have to talk about that I care to listen to? But the truth is, what you see is not what you actually get. You really need to walk a mile in somebody else's shoes to understand who they are and where they came from. So I'm going to give you my journey talk, an abbreviated version of my journey talk, what I've lived through and how I got to where I am. And then hopefully some of that will bear upon your own lives. So I grew up as one of 9 children. I am the 8th of 9 children. I am the kid who is just underneath the kid who is standing, my brother Chris. 4 sisters, 4 brothers, and actually, when I was born into a relatively well-off middle-class family. But then my biological father, actually, to cut a long story short, was abusive. And so one day my mother was doing dishes and she heard a child crying, and then the child stopped crying and she kept doing the dishes for a little while, but she's like, she just had a tweaking in her head that there was something wrong, that the child stopped crying. So she went into to a bedroom and discovered that my biological father was smothering one of the children and evidently trying to kill that child. That child was me. I was the 8th of 9 kids. And so she decided to leave my biological father. And we went to upstate New York, where we survived on welfare. My father was a lawyer. He could have paid alimony, but because we weren't lawyers, we couldn't get him to pay alimony. So we grew up in poverty in upstate New York. And actually, even when I graduated high school and when I was, say, your age, I weighed about 115 pounds. I'm not an overweight guy today, but I weigh 60 pounds more today than I did when I was in college. So we didn't have heat in the winter. We would go and chop down trees, drag them across snow-covered fields, and burn them in fireplaces or wood stoves. And we'd often just, in upstate New York, where I grew up, you would put a bottle of water next to your bedside at night, or not a bottle of water, just a glass of water, and it would be frozen in the morning oftentimes. So this is the existence that I lived and I grew up with in the beginning. But I was lucky because my mom always valued education. We all, paid a lot of attention to our studies. I ended up getting a job from something that's called the Civilian Employment Training Act, which was meant for the poorest of the poor. It was a program to try to train you in job skills that would be relevant to your future and hopefully uplift you to more meaningful work. So I got a job given to me by the government at minimum wage to be a janitor in my high school. And so that's the kind of thinking that they had, about what people who were growing up on welfare, what their futures looked like. So what I actually did was I found I had gone to a class tour in the county courthouse, which is that building on the upper left there. And they had a data processing center in that building, and they had to dial up. This is back in the late, let's see, this is back in the late 70s, 1978 or 1979. And I was able to get a job as a computer programmer. Actually, I didn't start as a computer programmer. I started as a data operator, changing tapes and, working on, paperwork for the elections department or whatever. But I ended up being able to teach myself how to program, got a job programming, actually paid more than minimum wage at that job. And I ended up going to Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, also in upstate New York, as soon as I could. But Schoharie was a hard place. There's a lot of disasters that happen in Schoharie. Anybody know upstate New York at all? Any upstater New York? Oh, there's a couple. So Schoharie had the Schoharie Creek, which is, there's an interstate that runs through Schoharie, over Schoharie Creek. That picture right there is when the Schoharie Creek flooded and caused the bridge of the interstate to go down. Many, many cars went over the bridge without realizing there was no bridge there. And so, that's an example of a disaster there. There were other floods, there was a town that blew up because of an Enron pipeline that ran from Houston to Canada, and it ran through Schoharie Valley. It had a hole in it, and in the morning at 5:30 one day, a pickup truck drove through, and it was a nuclear bomb effectively that went off in that valley. And anyone who was outside was killed instantly, and anyone who was inside was lucky because their buildings all burnt down, but they could escape outside because the bomb happened so fast that they could escape outside. So it was weird things that happened in Schoharie, but it was good. What I say is, eat trauma for breakfast or whatever. Trauma, anything that doesn't kill you makes you more alive. And so I encourage you. I think that's a little bit naive. I've discovered later, actually, trauma isn't that good for you. But it was a strong character builder in the early days. I went to RPI. I got a job. I couldn't afford RPI, but so I would go on co-ops during the summers, and actually take a summer and fall and take 7 months off to work to pay for my tuition, and got through RPI. And IBM was one of the places I co-opted, and I was working on operating systems just when the IBM PC came out, well before, you guys probably don't even know what an IBM PC is, but it was before Macintoshes, effectively. Well, it's after the Apple II, but before the Macs. So working at IBM was an eye-opening experience. And any of you who are looking at working at large companies, I think, you're in this class, I think, because you're interested in entrepreneurship. So maybe this is obvious, but you don't really control your destiny when you're working in a large company. It's very, very hard to have that much impact, especially as someone in your earliest part of your career. And so when I was working for IBM, I gravitated towards a group that was doing the most interesting work back before, Skype and Zoom and all that. Back before the internet, even they had this idea of video phones, where you would have, instead of a regular phone, you would have a computer that would have a screen on it, and you could talk to somebody and look at their face over the screen. You can obviously do this with your smartphones this day, but this was back in 1981 or something like that. And so this group had been working on this project and this technology for about 7 years. And then, I really respected the engineers in that group. They were awesome. And I wanted to be a part of that sort of excitement they had around their product. But what happened when I was working at IBM was IBM bought another company, and they basically dissolved the group because they replaced the engineering group with the new company that they bought. They made $1 billion acquisition, and they said, "Oh, sorry, this 10 or 20 person team, we've got another solution that actually wasn't as good, but they had to go with it because the product fit the rest of the product line that they'd acquired. So that led me to the observation that I wanted to have a little bit more control over my life. And what's the difference between these two images? Does anyone know what is a one-line description of what this is? One tells you what's going on in the room, and the other one tells the room what is going to happen. If there's a thermostat that changes the temperature of the room, and there's the thermometer that tells you what the temperature is in the room. So with the realization that, with the respect that I had for that engineering group at IBM that I wanted to be a part of, I actually said, but I couldn't stand the thought of working for 6 or 7 years on a product and never actually seeing the light of day in the prime of my life, and the energy and the intensity, the kind of 80 to 100-hour weeks I was willing to put in. I didn't want to actually give up that level of control over my life. And I looked to, does anyone know where this is? Where is it? It is Spain, good. And does anybody know what this is? It's an aqueduct, and it's in Segovia. It's outside of Madrid, maybe about an hour outside of Madrid. But one of the things that's amazing about engineering and about science is that you can create things that actually have a long-term impact. This aqueduct was functioning until the 1970s in Segovia, and it eliminated the problems that you would have had if you didn't have a fresh water supply to a city. And it ran 12 or 15 miles to provide water to that city, Segovia, and stopped all the pestilage, and all of the sort of diseases you would have if you didn't have a working sewage system. And it was working for nearly 2,000 years. And I thought, this is something this is why I want to build things in the first place. It's not just to have a conversation or discussion or do something in the newspaper for a day or two, but to actually have a lasting impact on society and improve the quality of life for thousands or millions of people. And that's what the aqueduct system did for the citizens of not just Rome, but also for Spain thousands of years later. So I created a company, based off of some research that I'd done, and with 3 other founders, and that was called MapInfo. So MapInfo, I started when I was, I think, 21 years old. I had just graduated RPI, and I started straight out of school. And we were the first, if you've ever typed an address into a computer and seen a street map, like to get here today, I use that on my phone. It's actually billions of people use it every day, effectively, to get around. We were the first to do that in the world, and it grew to be a couple $100 million revenue company. And in 8 years after we started it, it became a public company. So one of the things that makes for an interesting company is the communities that a company builds. We built several communities around our product. Our product not only provided the maps and the software, it also provided a programming language so that developers could write applications on top, and it could become value-added resellers. And so, and it became a framework and had plugins and all the APIs that enabled big companies like Microsoft and Oracle and other companies to incorporate our technology into their products. And so there were thousands of software developers, and still are thousands of software developers today that use that. And so that was a couple of different sets of communities: programmers, value-added resellers, and end users. The million people that the first time they ever typed an address into a computer looked at street maps through MapInfo. We would have end user conferences all over the world, and that created a vibrant community of people that still use the products Even today, there's I think over 1,200 people that work for MapInfo globally. So, but after doing that, I wanted to, do some other things. I was still young. I was 28 years old, and so I started a band. This is just part of my journey. This has nothing to do with what I do today. But I was a singer and a keyboard player and a songwriter in a band called Janet Speaks French. Does anyone have any idea of which one I was of the three people on this? I'll tell you, I wasn't the one with the good legs. But any guesses? I'm the guy with the hat, the hat. That was me. Okay, so Janet Speaks French, and then after doing that for a while, we charted on I think we were in the top 40 on I think 130 radio stations or whatever, but it wasn't very successful. There's like 2,800 radio stations in the United States, so it kind of doesn't matter unless you're on all of them. So we some of the founders or other people that had worked with me at MapInfo asked me to start another company. I started another company. It's called NetCentric. We coined the term cloud computing, and I trademarked that term in 1996 for that next company. After the .bomb era, we grew the company to about 8 million in revenue and about 10 million in expenses. And that sounds pretty good compared to a lot of startups today. But in the .bomb era, if your income was less than your expenses, then you were out of business. And so one of the things that taught me was how important it is to not have to be reliant on investor capital like VCs, to be really reliant on customer revenues. And it was something that I'd done in my first company. And as a result, we were able to maintain the majority ownership, even as it went public of my first company. But we became overly dependent on venture capital. So I'm here to tell you, as a venture capitalist, that venture capital can be evil, or at least it has repercussions to how you grow your business and your control over your business. So that company failed, and I felt really depressed around that. But it is the reality that a lot of companies that you start may actually lead to, may not work, right? So at SOSV, we're probably luckier than most, but at the pre-seed stage, with just a couple of founders and an idea that we invest, around 60%, 55% of the companies we back after 7 years have failed after 7 years of trying, or after 2 years of trying and run out of money or whatever. But as of 7 years in, only 45% of the companies are still around. So this is very, very depressing to entrepreneurs to put years of effort into starting a company. And in fact, after my second company failed, I felt extremely depressed. And I'll note that of the 2,400 founders that we have backed at SOSV through the over 1,000 companies that we've backed, 3 of our founders, after the failure of their companies, made the bad decision or the bad judgment that because the company failed, that they were a failure. And 3 of our founders committed suicide. And that is a very real reality that you should be worried about. Not taking it's not to say you're not responsible for what you do as a founder. You always are responsible, but it doesn't mean you always will win. And when you don't win, it doesn't mean you're a failure. So just bear it in mind that when you start a company, you are learning and growing and becoming stronger, even through the failures, even through the challenges. and just be aware that that depression around failures should not extend to the founders and the founding team, despite the fact that it is very natural to do that. So I also I went to film school. I got a MFA from USC Film School. I made about 100 films. This is a documentary film that won some awards. I won some other awards for short films. And that brought me into, at the end of my time at USC, a war was breaking out after 9/11 in Iraq, led by the U.S. Bush administration, and I was against the war, so I became a documentary filmmaker out in Baghdad, and I got into Baghdad early on, before the shock and awe campaign. If you guys are probably not even born back then, but we were really it was the big start of the war, and I was there for. And actually, if anyone is triggered by images, you may want to not look at some of the next images. But we had some. I was just acting as a photojournalist for CNN and Reuters and for various newspapers through that time. So, one of the things is you see this woman there is actually my wife. I met her in Iraq, and then at the end of the time there in Baghdad, as a reporter, I created a humanitarian organization, and it was called Jumpstart, and we basically took all the bombed out and looted buildings in Baghdad, like the ministries of education, and a dozen ministries. The ministries. Oops, just going to turn the volume off. Hospitals, the National Library, the National Museums. Everything from bombed churches. There's a lot of terrorist actions as well. So when a terrorist bomb would go off, we would go and clean up the scene and deal with the issues there. And we had about 3,500 people. It was the largest humanitarian organization in Iraq at the time. One of the difficult things about that time was that it made us a target. My co-founder of the organization was assassinated. Most of my senior management team was also given death threats if they were to continue working for the organization. It's a blessing that if you're an entrepreneur today, just starting a tech company in the United States, you don't have to worry about your senior management team getting assassinated or receiving death threats so much. It's not too common unless you have a really bad investor. But anyway, so we went through and we built a lot of housing for people. We built thousands of homes for people in Baghdad, Fallujah, Najaf, some of the worst hit areas in the region, and then also did that same sort of work in just right after that. Israel sort of destroyed their communities in the Gaza Strip, where they had taken the land for farming, and we helped rebuild we built a educational university in the Gaza Strip afterwards, et cetera. So that was called Gaza Polytechnic, and it's like a 2-year technical school. So this is my wife, and I met her she was a war correspondent, and so we met and we got married, and when we got married, 9 months and 7 days later, this little creature came along. So the timing was perfect. It wasn't 8 months and 1 week later. It was 9 months and 7 days later. But when I found out that my wife was pregnant, I had to give up the war zones and all of that. And so I moved to Kinsale, Ireland. Now the good news, throughout the intervening period where I was doing all of this, I had made a whole bunch of investments, and I came back, and the investments were doing really well. I had a couple of IPOs, and I had a couple of companies that grew to. Actually, has anyone ever played the game Guitar Hero? Or yeah, a couple of people. Yeah, it was a really fun game. And Rock Band. So that was made by one of the companies that I had backed at a seed stage out of MIT. And there was a whole bunch of other companies that did pretty well. And so I came back to a situation where I had a lot of money that needed to be deployed or redeployed. And so I started to grow SOSV after spending time in the war zone. So that's where I found my new purpose. And then Charlotte was followed by Matthias. There's Matthias. And then I was starting companies. And actually, I started a company. I had this idea before I moved back to Ireland. I was in Spain, and I had this idea that you could use a phone to track your location and your car's location, and then there could be another person who wants a ride, and the other person says, "I want to ride to this place." And then the car comes and picks the person up and then takes them on to the journey. So I patented those ideas in 2008. It's developed into a family of over 30 patents that Uber and Lyft and all these other companies are currently violating. So they know that they're violating them, and they have been noticed. The good news is they pay triple damages since the notification period. So we'll eventually get them to pay up. But that was everything from the 5 stars you have on rating systems to to having you pick up at given points or sharing rides with other people, et cetera, is all covered in this in the master patents there. And I did some other work in transportation. I ended up doing a lot of work with the busing networks in China, and basically that company spun into 4 different companies, and 3 of those companies were acquired, and the remaining company is still doing a lot of work today. So venture capital, from a venture capital perspective, I wanted to create more communities and have more scalable investment opportunities, and so I created SOSV as a vehicle to fund. At the time, we called them accelerators. I backed, you guys probably have heard of like Techstars, 500 Startups, or Y Combinator. So when Techstars was coming out, I had actually co-invested with Techstars, the founder of Techstars, one of the 2 founders of Techstars, Brad Feld, back in his days in Cambridge. And so I helped fund the creation of Techstars when it launched to Boston, which was the first city that they launched into. And then I also funded the first 500 Startups fund as well. And at the same time, even before 500 Startups, we had created China Accelerator and Hacks, or Hackcelerator, we called it back in the day, with my partner, Cyril Ebersweiler. I also was on some TV shows. You've heard of Shark Tank. I was on Shark Tank. Is that what they call it here? They call it Shark Tank, right? So in the rest of the world, they call it Dragon's Den. And so I was on the Irish Dragon's Den program. That may be very famous in Ireland. And so I was on a lot of TV shows, and I was asked to shape the national policy for Ireland. And for entrepreneurship, I did that. And then continued to grow the Hacks and the IndieBio brands. So we originally, as I said, called them accelerators. But then we diverged in that most accelerators in the day were giving like $20,000 and take 7% of your company, and we ended up giving more like $500,000, which other accelerators had since copied. YC, I think, gives $500,000 sometimes. But we were the first to do this type of program. And we also have a lot more resources. We actually spend tens of millions of dollars building out wet lab facilities and whatnot for IndieBio and for HAX. And so for deep tech accelerators, we try to create these communities where founders are learning from other founders in the same space, tackling different problems, different markets, but still being able to benefit from the technical capabilities of our staff, as well as from the technical capabilities of their peer in that cohort, as well as the network effect of the benefits of all those companies. Lastly, I guess just to cover the rest of my journey, I also have been involved with giving away some money in terms of the O'Sullivan Foundation. If you the first large backer of the Khan Academy. There was others that were smaller backers like Bill Gates and Google, but then I came in, I gave them a check, which actually made them stay a nonprofit. And then since then, they've been able to offer free worldwide education for what's their expression? Free world-class education for anyone, anywhere, sort of thing. So I'm still on the board of Khan Academy. I've also backed a number of other, efforts and initiatives, particularly in autism. I have a son who has autism, and we do research at, a dozen or so leading research university grants that we sponsor every year. And that's it. So that is my journey talk. It's about, I find that right now, so one last note. You are right now college student. Yeah. So something. Hello? Yeah, it's working. Somebody is screwing with it, or maybe it's just going unreliable. So you're right now at the point where you can decide whether you want to go work for a big company or actually go from living like a college student, living poor and not having cars and all this other stuff, to living like a college student and being an entrepreneur. And so I would recommend that rather than just go and getting the job with McKinsey or these consulting groups or Google or whatever, that you actually have an entrepreneurial experience at this point in your life. It could actually help you shape your entire future. For the first 7 years after I started my first company, all of my classmates and peers were making far more money than I was. And then, boom, the company goes public and suddenly I'm making more money than anyone else, So it gives you, that's not how it always works out. But even if it didn't work out financially, what it did do is it gave me a growth experience that I could apply and that you all could apply to being a leader in the organizations that you do go on to either found, co-found, or be part of in the future. So I do recommend that you do it before you start to get your expenses up in a way that is unsustainable if you did decide to become a founder. It's very hard to go earning like $150,000 or $200,000 or something back to earning $50,000 a year as you're starting and trying to extend your runway to build, to create something out of nothing. So take the opportunity if you can and go for it if you can. It's not easy. It is not a path that is for most people. You may decide you're not to follow that path yourself, and that's okay. But if you have it in your heart to really, if you're unsatisfied with the status quo, if you can't imagine a world that is as it is today, and you know that there's a different way of doing it, And you can provide that leadership and that guidance and a path to create mostly through science and technology, a future which is dramatically different than the status quo, then please build that model that makes the existing model obsolete. The scalability of engineering and science today gives people the disproportionate power, people like yourselves, the disproportionate power to have a huge impact on the world. And it may take 7 or 8 years to have 1 million people be affected by what you're doing, but sometimes just in 2 of the trends that I've been associated with, it may only take another 10 years after 1 million people are using the technology to where 1 billion people are using the technology. That was in the case with MapInfo. And it only took another 2 years after 1 billion people were using the technology for 2 billion people to be using the technology. It really is a way to change the course of humanity and to improve the quality of life of everyone on the planet. So it's a gift, it's a responsibility, and I hope that you use your talents to further, human and planetary health. Thank you.
So we're gonna have Kyle come up here and ask Sean some questions. And guess what? What I want is you guys to be brilliant speakers when you guys, next year, maybe a year or two when you graduate. How about how? Okay. So we'll have those questions. There is one thing I forgot to say in Sean's bio. When we were exchanging messages about his talk today, guess where he said when he looked at all the startups that SOSV had invested in? What was it, 2,400? No, 1,200. Okay. Which university did a lot of the?
I actually think Berkeley is the #1 tool for climate tech, and it may be #1 overall.
What do you guys think?
All right. Sean really deserves another round of applause. At the same time, I just want to make sure most of you are still awake. Okay. So I'm really going to ask Sean 2 questions for 5 to 10 minutes, and we're going to open up for questions from you guys. We really want to make this class interactive, and make sure you stay alert, be awake. So Sean, thank you for the talk.
Thanks. Yeah.
It's very good to work with Orbistar, which is part of SOSV. Really fascinating life story. The first question for you is, what do you think your life journey sort of impacted your decision for going to venture capital and start being an investor? And what is it that you want to achieve through investing in startups?
Okay, can you hear me now? Sometimes, for whatever reason, I have to hold it. No, it's not working. Okay, it's kind of working. So why did I go into venture capital? So I don't think most people should go into venture capital. I think the people that should go into venture capital are people that have generation of capitalists. Yeah, this is kind of, maybe it's the battery. Is there any other thing that can be switched out? I don't know. So I'll keep talking, and if there's anything to switch out, we'll switch it out. Okay. Okay. Well, I'll give it a try. So, so the people that should go into venture capital, venture capital isn't a good first job, not to be an investor, because if you're going to be on the board of a company and advising a founder, you probably should know something about running a company. You're supposed to be giving advice to people. And so the first job you should go into is actually working at a startup, having great responsibility at a startup, whether you're a founder or whatever, before you actually go on the board of companies. So I had the experience of creating a couple of startups. It was like 3 or 4 startups throughout my life that I created. And I built a couple of them to, a couple thousand, one to a couple thousand people, and another 2 to about 100, 200 people. And so I had enough experience to be able to give founders advice about hiring people and about having to do layoffs and about how having to pivot is necessary and all the things that you have to really think about in terms of channel development and sales development and how to advise somebody to get the initial sales or pilot contracts or whatever else it is. So so going into venture capital is not a first choice for people. I think the better choice, and even if you look at people that you went into as an advisor into our programs, that's a little different than actually being the investor that's sitting on the board. You could get a job like Vinod Khosla and John Doerr, I think actually both work for Kleiner Perkins, which is a VC firm. They left Kleiner Perkins. John Doerr went to Intel and worked at Intel for a while. Vinod Khosla went and became a co-founder of Sun Microsystems. And then he came back to Kleiner Perkins and was a better VC for having had operational experience. So, and then he actually has his own firm now called Khosla Ventures. Those are some good examples of how to get into venture capital. If people are looking to get into venture capital, run a company first, build it up to be a multinational, world-leading technology leader in a sector, and then I think you can probably advise others on how to do the same thing. But I'll tell you another thing is that after the 3rd or 4th time I was starting a company, it's starting a company and building a company to be several million in revenues or tens of millions in revenues and a large company takes a long time. It takes like 7 years. And sometimes along the way, those companies are going to fail or they're not going to pan out as well as you thought. So after having done it for 3 or 4 times, I said, I only have so much of my life left. How can I have a greater impact? And I had developed a relative fortune at the time, and I was writing a lot of checks to my friends and that were starting companies and whatnot. And so I said, okay, I just want to do that, but I want to affect whole industries rather than just 5 or 10 companies. And so then that's when I developed, I was really searching for a model that was scalable. And that's when we created the SOSV model. And we went after new segments. Like we don't do accelerators anymore because we're operating at a different scale. We call them startup development programs. We give the companies more money. We are much more hands-on than a regular accelerator program. And we have all these facilities and we follow on into the investments. But even when I was starting at the accelerator model, I liked the scalability of the accelerator model because you could actually, be investing across a whole sector of the economy. And we chose to focus on very, very specific areas. So we have like 11 PhDs on staff in molecular biology or, biophysics or chemistry or electrical engineering or whatever. And that allows us to be very specialized in those sectors and really to help shape industries in the areas of particular climate tech, human health, and planetary health. And that to me was a mission. We all of us are really looking to have some kind of meaning in our lives. We all want to have some purpose and some fulfillment in our lives. And a lot of times people get really trapped up in the thought that it's all about the money. It's all about the amount of money in your bank account or the car you drive or something. I drive a 12-year-old car. It's a nice car. It's a Mini. So but it's just a 12-year-old car. It's a way of getting around. And I don't think I get any fulfillment about driving, a car or the house that I live in or whatever. I get fulfillment about trying to, the Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Once you've covered the basic needs of food, shelter, I forget what the third layer is. Sex is up on that. There's some reproduction or something is in there in that list, that hierarchy of needs. Well, but then you get into the areas of how do you actually seek self-fulfillment. And for me, the thing was in helping others and building communities of people that would help create a better community of human beings on the planet. We suffered a lot as children by not having a good opportunity, and by being poor. I don't think, America is about trying to keep others down. America is about trying to lift others up. And, so to me, that is a value that I wanted to help more entrepreneurs and create a system that more entrepreneurs could be helped up and to go, move faster and be able to go travel further.
Cool. All right, so great. So you brought up a keyword, which is impact. So to draw our attention to the theme of the semester, which is compassion amidst capitalism, it's kind of mouthy sometimes. So what type of impact do you want to make through investing?
That's oh yeah. Thank you. Yeah, that works. So that was something I discovered even in Iraq. So I was doing this thing. It was a humanitarian organization, an NGO. It was a very large organization. We were affecting thousands or even tens of thousands of lives, at least, with the work that we were doing in that NGO, probably small hundreds of thousands. And but then I realized after all it was done that, it was a hard row, with Al-Qaeda after us and things like that. But even ignoring that, at the end of the day, the bigger impacts that I had on in my life were through technology and actually improving the platform of what it means to be human, actually improving our capability as human beings to be able to, save lives, like through basically the maps, just actually, there's so many ambulance companies and police companies and, all of the cell towers and everything else that were laid out in the United States were all using our MapInfo, capabilities. We owned the telecommunications industry, how they planned this out. We owned, probably 300 or 400 of the Fortune 500 companies were using us to plan out how they delivered services, whether it's parcel delivery or whatever types of services, where to put their bank branches or whatever. So I realized that actually we, by having these companies, I actually had a far greater impact than just doing an NGO. And the technology is so much more scalable that's what I wanted to enable others to also do. Use the technologies to have, to be able to save thousands of lives, or tens of thousands of lives through new forms of cancer treatments, through new forms of dialysis, or replacing the need for dialysis completely, through longevity investments, and obviously through making our planet more sustainable in all of the investments that we do in food, future food, and other areas. We are making a dent on climate tech.
Awesome. So I think we have 13 minutes left. I think we're going to open up to questions in the audience. Do we have mic for that? Okay. If you have a question, just shout it out.
Yeah, of course I regret choices I've made along the way. I actually no, it's working. I actually felt very guilty about the people who died under my command in Iraq. And it was pretty obvious as the largest NGO in Iraq that Al-Qaeda was going to come after us. And I just kept growing and building the organization. And then people got killed. And they did it. And we kept on going, and we kept on doing the work. And I asked them if they wanted to keep doing it. But I still feel very guilty about the people who were tortured and killed. Would I have done things differently? I probably would have. I'm not sure it would have been the right thing to do. Because actually you do have to going on, even if it's personally hard. Even if there are people who are dying. Because frankly, if you don't build a society where people can operate without the threat of terrorism, then it all falls down. And we kept on trying to build and rebuild. It was probably the right thing to do, but I feel a lot of guilt. Even now, 20 years later. So I'm not sure if I answered the second part of the question, but it's hard to make difficult choices. I've had to lay people off. That's one of a really tough thing is you'll all, if you start a business, you'll all feel pretty terrible about that. You make a decision, we're going to expand the business or whatever, things are going well. And then suddenly you have to lay people off, and maybe you're laying people off who their wife just got pregnant 2 weeks ago, and you're laying them off, because you're laying off 8 people or 10 people in a small company, but you got to keep the company alive. You feel really bad about that, and you blame yourself for some of those things as well. And it's probably true. You have to take responsibility. You blame yourself for that. So I think it makes you grow up quickly. One of the things about being a CEO is, you think a lot of times that you're at the top of the pyramid, but you're the person who's telling everyone what to do. That's not actually how it feels when you're actually there. If you are servicing the needs of the customers and you're servicing the needs of your staff, you're really at the bottom of the pyramid. Your shareholders, you have to answer to your shareholders. You have to keep your staff, engaged and happy, and keep everyone productive. You're really, juggling a lot of balls to keep everything up. A lot of people have this dream that, hey, I can become my own boss. I'll go golfing on Thursdays. That's not at all what you're going to find if you start a company. Not until you have a profitable company. And a lot of times it'll take quite a few years. And even when you are a profitable company, if you're trying to beat the rest of the market, there's some competitor that's got more funding than you do, and you have to beat them. And I've been through this. You just keep driving on and pushing on. So you're going to make a lot of mistakes, and you'll have a lot of regrets. But in the end, it's about making the best choices that are in front of you, and just keeping your feet moving forward, and recognizing at the end of the journey that, wow, it was amazing. It was totally awesome. The people did the best work of their lives working together on a team that you and the rest of your co-founders were able to keep running. And that, I think, is the challenge for all of us, is to do the best work of our lives in every job that we're in. And sometimes that means the only way you can do that is to found a company and create a place where you can be that committed to that new vision of the world that makes to use the, whose expression was it? To build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. I've done that a couple of times. Like, Maps used to be paper maps. I don't know if anyone remembers, but they used to have maps on paper with the streets and everything to get around. We made that model obsolete. You know, they used to run software on floppy disks in computers, and then you run the software there rather than running it in the cloud. You know, that model, you know, is made obsolete. You know, so you can actually really change everything, but you have to have this desperate, you know, new vision of how the world works, and then you have to pursue it relentlessly. But you know, you're going to make some bad decisions on the way, and sometimes it's not even that you make bad decisions, it's just that you have bad luck because bad things happen to good people. Any other questions? Here's one. Yeah.
Hi, I'm my question is, when you're starting out as an entrepreneur, there are a lot of people that try to hold you back. So my question is, how do you deal with people's opinions, and especially when you're taking a lot of risks, and how do you keep believing in yourself by
Yeah, actually, you know, one of the things I think that's absolutely necessary is to have. There's this thing called forming, storming, and norming, right? You know, or I forget what the order of it is. It could be storming, forming, and norming. But you know, when you have a founding team, everybody on that team needs to be, you know what the North Star is. What are you trying to do? Because some people, and actually, the second company I founded was founded by the wrong founding team. One of the people in the company, the only thing he cared about was getting rich. And that actually polluted the team in a toxic way. And so the real purpose of a company is not for the founders to get rich. Who can buy into that? Are customers going to buy into that? You know, is the staff going to buy into one of the founders getting rich, or all the founders getting rich? Is the press going to want to cover that company? No, they're going to cover the company, and they're going to care about the company. The customers are going to be delighted about the company because the products enable them to do something that they couldn't otherwise do, and it creates a new fantastic way to do things in the world. So, like, but there could be 2 or 3 different visions as to how to make that new fantastic thing in the world, and you just have to create a aligned team so everybody knows what that North Star is. And the truth is that the North Star you first set out to do, if everyone's aligned, you will get closer to that North Star. But you will also discover that that North Star is not the right direction. Because, you know, a company that doesn't pivot, you know, that goes for one direction and goes to the end in that direction, almost always fails. You have to go along a journey for a ways, and then, you know, again, get the customer input, find out what's going on, and basically say, you know what, the product we thought was going to work, it's like, you know, some of the biggest and most successful companies in the world, like what's Slack, is worth $25 billion now. So a nice monetary win. But that's not what they set out to do. It was a gaming company. It was not a business communications platform. And the part that was sticking was the communications bit. So they pivoted, and they pivoted hard. And we did the same thing in MapInfo. We started out as navigation systems in cars to tell you how to get around. We decided it was more interesting to actually allow people to use any computer to tell you where the locations are and make that available, surface that information. So you have to pivot, and you have to pivot hard. But you also have to get everybody on the founding team and the senior leadership team to be able to pivot with you and get concurrence on that vision. And that just means you deke it out until you have that consensus.